Well, we're starting. So first off, maybe that's where we begin. Is what is life like for both of you right now? I know that you have a number of projects going on, driven by your passions, especially when it comes to people who are facing injustice.
Yeah, so Chris and I have a production company, Knox Productions. That's how we created this documentary. We also do a lot of like journalism and activism work. So I work on writing, right now I'm researching a case of a young woman who was wrongly accused, and I'm working on writing that piece and putting it together. But yeah, we work with like the Washington Innocence Project to go down to the legislature and advocate for criminal justice reform. We do podcast series. We did a big podcast series about false confessions. So we
and actually coming out here in February, we have a new podcast series coming out with iHeartRadio about Lucy Letby, who's a nurse in the UK, accused and convicted of killing infants in the neonatal ward. And there's good reason to believe that her conviction is unsafe and that perhaps no crimes even occurred at all. So it's a wild case, maybe one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in British history. And
one that came to my attention because she was very ruthlessly vilified in the tabloid press in the UK. And people who were experiencing it there said, wow, we haven't seen anything like this since Amanda Knox. And so a lot of people reached out to me specifically and said, hey, we think you need to look into this because we feel like there's a young woman who's, pretty face, like no history of violence, suddenly being held up as the worst female demon that anyone can, imagine. And they're like, this story is a little too good or too bad to be true. So can you take a look at it?
And so is that at the driving heart of all the projects that you're taking on now?
No.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that a lot of people reach out to me and to us as storytellers because they trust us, right? Like I have a very lived experience with this, and so I'm not just any old journalist. Like I'm someone who has been on both sides of the equation, and they feel like they know that I have their interest at heart, that I'm going to be humanizing them while at the same time like holding firm and being objective to the truth. And so that's where they feel like they can be held, and they don't. A lot of people who are in these positions, especially when they've already been accused, are afraid that that the media is just going to amplify that like they're trying to be heard, but the story is already out there, and that people are just looking for opportunities to say, well, I got to interview the murderer, or I got to be the next person who say, did you or did you not murder this person? And there's this feeling of being deeply scared of something that in psychology you call narrative foreclosure, the feeling that you don't have a say in your own story, that you aren't even the protagonist of your own story, you're the villain in someone else's, and that trapped and helpless feeling that no one's really going to hear you out.
So yeah, those stories that we're going to be telling stories like that probably forever. Like injustice is a firm part of our world and our storytelling world, but we're also doing things in comedy. I mean, Amanda's been, she's actually later this week, she's doing some stand-up comedy here in Seattle. And we're working on projects that are more light and buoyant and joyous as well. And one of the things that I hope people see in Mouth of the Wolf is that Amanda is this round person who has many facets to her. And the justice advocate and the person grappling with the shadow of this long trauma stretching back to 2007 is a deep part of her. But also, she's a singer and a dancer and a comedian and a mom. And our life today also is a lot of hanging out with our 4-year-old daughter and our 2-year-old son. And, it's not all trauma and tragedy and the fight for justice, although that is a deep part of it as well.
I want to ask about that stand-up comedy. Perhaps not expected, right? But first, I want to touch on something that you just mentioned. After producing the scripted series and this documentary, Do you feel like you have reclaimed the narrative, that you own your story?
I think that my story is bigger than me, and that I have a very important perspective, but it's not the only perspective. And I think that, again, my story and also this case blew up for a reason. And it wasn't just because what happened to my roommate was vicious and horrible. Like that no study abroad student should ever just go as a young person with everything ahead of them and wind up raped and murdered in their own bedroom. Like that, unfortunately, violence against women happens all the time. But this case, I think, touched a nerve at a particular moment in time. And when people were reevaluating women's places in the world, but also reevaluating our relationship with truth and with the media and with justice systems. And I think there was also a lot of political components that came into play, nationalism came into play. And so the reason this story blew up in the world was not because of me, it wasn't because of Meredith, it wasn't because of the individual players, it was this perfect storm that seemed to touch a nerve with so many people for a lot of different reasons. And so I'm really cognizant that as someone who has a very personal stake in that story, I also have a responsibility. The truth matters, the actual facts of this particular case matter. And it's really important to not let those things get lost, because one of the things that, Meredith's family and I have agreed on this entire time without maybe all of us realizing it, is that the truth of what happened to my roommate got completely lost in the scandal that arose because of the prosecution's crazy wild theories about this case. And then of course everyone picking up on it and turning it into a horrific pornographic fantasy and making a ton of money off of that with endless headlines. So the facts of that case and getting the truth about what actually happened matters on an individual level. But the bigger questions about how misogyny played a role in the way that this story was told, the way that different kinds of violence was perpetrated against women, multiple women in this story, how police abused their power in attempting to force a guilty party instead of allowing the evidence to lead them. I think these are all issues that have been coming to the forefront, especially once we have the ability to document and have a little bit more transparency with how the justice system gets its job done. I think more and more people are learning that this sort of black and white fairy tale that the criminal justice system finds truth beyond a reasonable doubt and only bad guys go to prison, and helps victims. I think people are realizing that it's more complicated than that, and that we need to be asking bigger questions and demanding more of the people that we hold, that we trust to hold people accountable.
And the last time you spoke with KIRO 7, I believe, was in 2022 when you sat down with Monique McLovin and you talked about the deception bill, which was something that you were supporting, but that did not pass.
No, it didn't. And it's frustrating because the counter narrative to a really common sense, proposal which we were putting forth, which is in a custodial interrogation where someone has already been read their Miranda rights, so really limiting the scope of what that even would entail. You don't need to use deception in order to encourage a defendant or a suspect to give information. The counter argument was, well, we need to use deception. We need to lie to people in order to get them to tell the truth. And that's just not true. The evidence, all this research for years has shown that lying is a very effective way at cognitively making a person really confused and agitated, but it doesn't get them to tell the truth. It's not an effective way of getting truthful information from a person. It is very effective at breaking a person, but not at getting them to tell the truth. And so it's really frustrating to hear a counter narrative from law enforcement that isn't honest.
It also destroys trust with the community that they're supposed to protect. So on a broader social level, if they regularly engage in lying to the people that are witnesses or suspects, the people learn that the cops can't be trusted. So like if you want to have a good relationship between citizens and law enforcement, honesty is paramount. And so it's bigger than just what happens in the interrogation room. It's about our whole relationship with law enforcement on a society-wide level.
Yeah.
I'm curious if we could sort of dig into the documentary. You have the scripted series, now you have this documentary. How are they different, and why did you feel called to do this documentary?
Oh, they're so different. And you'll see when you finally see the documentary, because, you know, the twisted tale of Amanda Knox is really from my perspective, right? It's really grounded in my perspective. I EP'd on it. I even wrote on the series, and it's really rooted in that period that took place in 2007 to 2015 when I'm on trial. It's really putting you in my shoes as I'm living through that experience, and then it culminates in that encounter. It explains why I would want to come into contact with this person who is my prosecutor, and that is its scope. The true story of how that went down is a little more complicated, and that's where Chris's documentary comes in. This is not as much my documentary as it is his. And you'll see, like, the documentary is really rooted in his perspective. It's an incredibly intimate film. It is a documentary, but it's unlike any documentary you've ever seen, because Chris is not pretending to be just any old guy behind the camera. He's my husband who is there with me in my worst moments. And he is there to push me to articulate myself, to support me in really difficult moments, and to show what the long aftermath of injustice really looks like. And aftermath is a nice word, because I'm still legally in an abusive relationship with Italy. Like, I'm still trying to overturn a wrongful conviction in Italy, but I think you're better equipped to explain this.
Yeah.
Like, this is your film.
When Amanda was first invited back to Italy by the Italy Innocence Project in 2019 to give a keynote speech about trial by media, that opportunity came out of the blue for us. And it's suddenly Amanda was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize it, but I've been wanting to go back to Italy. When am I going to get a better opportunity than this, with the invitation of an innocence organization to speak about the very issues that caused the wrongful conviction? And so suddenly we're like, oh my God, are we going back to Italy? And I saw her grappling with this pull back towards that country. She was terrified. She was having panic attacks in the closet. I would find her crying. But she was also so determined to go back. And I saw that conflict within her, and maybe it's the natural storyteller in me, but I was like, I need to film this. Something momentous is happening. And I didn't know why I was filming it. She didn't know why. We didn't really have a vision that this was going to even be a film at that point, but it just seemed like something worth documenting. And as we went back to Italy that first time, and Amanda had to face the trauma of the media especially, and what it was like to be in that ever-present gaze, to not be able to move 2 steps without people literally tripping and falling over themselves to put a camera in her face. It was
under a literal spotlight.
Yeah. It was very difficult for her. But I also saw her for the first time coming into her power in relation to this long tragedy. And really, I think what this documentary shows is how Amanda, step by step, has been able to reclaim agency for herself. Because everything that happened from 2007 onward is a story, if you think about it, about what other people did. It's a story about how Rudy Guede murdered Meredith Kercher. It's a story about how Giuliano Menini, the prosecutor, wrongly convicted Amanda and Raffaele. It's a story of unethical media generating really sensational and unfair and untrue headlines for years. None of that says anything about who Amanda is as a person. And none of that was her doing. It was things that happened to her. And for the first time in that long story, Amanda finally was doing something that didn't have to happen. No one would blame her for never returning to Italy. No one would blame her for never wanting to speak to her prosecutor. And yet she was making that happen and doing so in a way that I found so inspiring, because she was not letting Italy or her prosecutor off the hook. She was not saying, it's all water under the bridge.
Oh my gosh.
You know?
One time he told me, oh, it's water under the bridge. And I was like, no, it's not.
Yeah, it's like she's holding authority to account, but she's doing so with compassion. And she's doing so by saying, and I'm also here to listen, and I'm here to see you as a human being. And it's a tightrope walk to do both of those things at once. But I find it so impressive and so necessary, especially at this moment when it feels like society is so polarized and there are so many people that seem like they're on the other side of this unbridgeable chasm. How can we possibly meet and talk to these people who have a different opinion than we do about what's happening in the country? Well, Amanda was able to sit down and be kind to the man who wanted her to spend life in prison. If she can do that, I can go repair my relationship with a friend I had a falling out with. Maybe I can talk to somebody I politically disagree with.
So I was surprised to read that you have a relationship with Giuliano
Yeah.
Bellini.
Yeah.
How did that develop?
Well, my goodness, isn't that the question, right? Because how do you confront somebody who is poised to be adversarial and hostile towards you? That was the question that I found myself in. And I also recognizing that a deep part of myself was poised to be adversarial and hostile towards him. I was hurt. I was a hurt person, and I was approaching the person who had hurt me. And so I knew that I had deep-seated feelings of anger and distrust and fear that I had to acknowledge and then set aside as I attempted to engage, like truly engage. Like I didn't want to just tell him off. I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in understanding him. I didn't understand why this had happened to me. And I feel like a lot of people who have been hurt by other people feel that way. Like that what happened to me wasn't a natural disaster. Just, oh, too bad, that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Like this was a man-made disaster. And I wanted to understand why. And I think that the easy answer that was sometimes posed to me was that, well, just some people are evil. Some people are evil and they don't care if they hurt you, end of story. But that didn't strike me as true. I didn't know this for sure, but what I did know is that people were really, really ready to just write me off as evil when I had been accused of a crime that I had nothing to do with. And the willingness to just easily accept the idea that like a human being can just be evil and worthless and not worth considering as a human being was how people treated me. And so I did not want to make that same mistake just because I was hurt. And so I had to acknowledge my hurt, allow it to inform me, but at the same time not allow it to blind me. And so when I reached out to him, I had to think of a way to communicate with him that wasn't automatically going to put him in a defensive position, that wasn't automatically just going to like bring us back to the courtroom and now we're arguing about the facts again and we're never going to see eye to eye. Like, how do you begin the conversation? And ultimately the realization I came to was we have every reason to distrust each other and to think that we have nothing in common. But what if we have something in common? What if? Like, ultimately, we're all people. We all have loved ones, we all have friends, we all want to have a good standing in our community. what do we all have? Even though he's a man from Italy, from a completely different generation than me, what do we have in common? And I felt like, given that the big, public nature of this case, I felt deeply misunderstood. Maybe he did too. And, I had seen in the past how, I had seen in court how he complained that, he called my family the Klan because we were from America, so wink, and because, he felt like the Americans were ganging up on Italy and trying to get an American girl off the hook for murder. And all this nationalism came into play, and so I felt like he clearly had some kind of victimhood that he was expressing in there, and I wanted to get to the root of that and see what legitimately was there. How did he feel like he was deeply misunderstood as a person? And so my first attempt to reach out to him was simply to say, you were wrong about me, but maybe I'm wrong about you too. Can we meet face to face? Because you in my mind are this nightmarish figure, this man who just decided to destroy my life for no reason. But I don't believe that people get up in the morning every day to do bad things. I think people get up in the morning feeling like they're the good guys, and especially somebody who works in law enforcement. And so how could he get up in the morning and show up in court every day to just spout lies about me and believe that he was in the right?
And so this documentary covers that first meeting and the second meeting, correct?
Yes, yeah.
I'm curious why you felt like you had to meet with him again. What were the unanswered questions that you had?
Well, the first meeting was a lot about those unanswered questions. But also it was 2 years into a letter correspondence, right? So we didn't just talk about the case, we talked about ourselves. We learned about each other. We came to care. I think the weird thing about getting close enough to someone to understand them and really appreciate them just in all of their, personality and frailty and passion is you can't help but come to care for them, or at least that's what it felt like for me. And I believe the same thing for my prosecutor. As we shared more details about each other's lives, a more human picture came into view, and we came to care about those human pictures that we presented to each other. And so when we finally encountered in Italy for the first time, absolutely, I was there to confront him about some stuff. But we walked away feeling like it's not like it was just done. We had a relationship now. Now we were bound to each other. And to this day, so going back the second time I didn't go back to Italy to confront my prosecutor again. I went back to Italy to go to court. I was on trial again, but I was in Italy, and so was Giuliano. And by now, he was a part of my life.
And the relationship isn't just a straight line from adversary to friend,
And it's weird to call him a friend.
Yeah, right? There isn't a good term for it.
There isn't a good term for it.
But, it has ups and downs, and it has moments of disconnect. And what Mouth of the Wolf is really doing is showing that long process the difficult process of trying to build a bridge to somebody that seems impossible to reach. And that involves moments of doubt and fear, moments where Amanda and I thought he was lying to us and that he was luring us back to Italy, that it was a trap of some kind, that he was going to try and charge her with something again. It involves moments of sharp disagreement, that this person seemed to say that he understood that I'm innocent, but then why is he saying this? And trying to navigate those ups and downs isn't something that you can capture in one scene. right? It's been a years-long journey, and it's ongoing.
Looking through the trailer, it looks like an emotional roller coaster, which
Oh, yeah.
understandably
Yeah.
it would be. What were some of the toughest moments?
Well, one thing that really spurred all of this really was when I became pregnant. Like, it's one thing to hold pain for yourself, right? But when my daughter was inside of me, like, I don't know, it's really hard to explain this to guys, but like, when you are the vessel through which a human being is coming into this world, like, every part of you is feeding and nurturing this life that is inside of you that you are responsible for. And when I became pregnant, it suddenly became very, very shockingly clear to me that I had what felt like a poison inside of me. My hurt, my rage, my sense that I didn't have closure I was afraid that I was going to unintentionally pass on some of this trauma that I had been holding on to my daughter. And I felt this incredible sense of urgency to fix myself for her. And a little bit to like fix the world, a little bit, just to make the world a little bit better so that it would be nicer to my daughter than it was to me. And so it was really hard to suddenly, it was hard to like have this like joyous thing that I had been wanting for so long that had been taken from me for a moment there. Like when they convicted me, I lost my ability to be a mother, and that was restored to me. And so I was so grateful for this, but suddenly I felt very overwhelmed with the responsibility of needing to be okay and what it would take to do that. How much I would have to do this very difficult tightrope walk over an abyss of despair and risk to get closer to this person who I didn't know how he would react and if he might hurt me again.
I mean, the kids were also a part of that journey because, you know, when Amanda had already begun this correspondence with her prosecutor when our daughter Eureka was born. And we were terrified that the paparazzi would find out that she was pregnant, that they would take photos and they would monetize and turn our child into content and, you know, frame her in relation to this long saga and all the ways they had vilified Amanda would spill over onto our child. And so we kept it very secret. And we had not, and no one outside of our close friends and family knew that Amanda was even pregnant. And so before the world knew, before we had announced to anyone that we had had a child, Amanda chose to send a photo of her and our daughter Eureka in the delivery room to Giuliano Menini. And it was a really bold act of trust and vulnerability to say, like, here's one of the most precious things that I have that no one else knows about, and I'm going to let you know about it. And you know, you get what you give is one of those things. Like, Amanda wanted to have a real human connection with this person. She wanted him to be vulnerable and open with her. So she had to take the first step and be open and vulnerable with him and to give him an act of trust.
And how did he respond?
Oh, he loved it. I mean, he loves kids. He's a father of 4 daughters, and so like
that was a moment.
That was a moment of commonality and connection. Yes. And I think that, I mean, even just the act of me reaching out to him sort of put him on a new footing with me, because as he said, no defendant has ever reached out to him before, much less nicely. And so I had a little bit the element of surprise in my favor.
And then for it to be this massive case.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like, a lot of people find themselves in difficult situations and with difficult relationships. And I'm not necessarily saying that the way I approached my difficult relationship is exactly the way that everyone should approach their difficult relationships. Like, boundaries matter. And something that I made sure, and that I think Chris made sure to really represent well in the documentary, is also how I established boundaries. Like, I was very open with myself. I was very willing to share with him and be vulnerable. But again, that didn't mean that I ever let him off the hook. Like, there is a way for you to approach someone with kindness and openness and with patience to allow, one of the reasons why this has somehow worked, this great experiment that I've been doing, is because I've been willing to let it evolve. Like, people do not change quickly, and especially when they have every motivated reason to not change their perspective about something. But if I feel like...
I mean, which is why, after that first meeting, which a version of was depicted in the scripted series, Manini continued to change and evolve, and when we met him again 2 years later, he was willing to say things on camera that he wouldn't say before, because his journey from being the dogged prosecutor intent on putting Amanda in jail to where he is today is a long and complicated one. And he's an old man now, and his corners are softening as happens with old men, but he's also stubborn, and he's also got deep-rooted Italian kind of Catholic misogynist ideas, and a part of us is like, some of those things are probably never going to fully change. It's so deeply rooted in his culture and in his generation. But he has also made really remarkable strides, I think, and we have to give him credit for what he's brought to the table, because, he didn't have to meet Amanda. He could have said, no, I'm never going to speak to you. He didn't have to agree to appear on camera, which he did. We showed him all the footage that's in this documentary before we finished putting it together, and he agreed to let us put it out, so that's to his credit.
And how much of the interactions with the two of you are in the documentary? Is it that, for example, the first interaction when it was more about accountability and answering those questions versus the second meeting?
I mean, the second meeting, I confront him about a number of things, but that wasn't the intention of the meeting. Like, the intention of the meeting was to see each other. And really, in a way, this was on the eve of me being reconvicted. He also showed up at that meeting to hold my hand and comfort me, because he knew that I was grieving. And so when I did confront him, because understandably, I was a little sore that day, I confronted him about some of the things that he had said about me in court. And I think people will be really surprised by what he has to say.
It's not just confrontation, though. I think it's also important to note that there's a personal side of this and this is something I think is applicable to all of us, that when you're in conflict with somebody and it feels like they have this power over you, it feels like you need something from them. You need them to say the thing you want them to say for you to be okay. And going into that meeting with him, Amanda was wavering back and forth in this place of I really want him. I want him to get a plane and write it in letters in the sky. I'm sorry, I was wrong,
This first meeting.
Yeah, I want the plaque. I want it signed, I want you to climb on top of a building and shout it to the world. And realizing how badly she wanted that from this man, she also realized that she was in a way still giving him power over her. That if he was the one who held the key to her closure and her peace, then she would never be okay. And so a big part of her catharsis, and what I think the documentary captures well, is her finding that her real power, her real agency, came not from wanting to get something from him, but from giving something to him. I've never seen her more powerful than when she walked into that room to meet him, not to get something, but to just offer him the opportunity to be seen as a human being, something that he didn't deserve after not giving that to her for so many years. But that didn't matter. She was there to give that to him, and no one could stop her from giving that to him. And she was beaming. I've never seen her more at peace and more powerful at the same time. And that's a lesson that I took away from that when you feel stymied, when it feels like society or other people in your life are blocking your path and you can't figure out how to get what you need, sometimes the answer is to give.
It's surprising, it's paradoxical.
Yeah. And so beaming after that first meeting.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was floating. I was in shock. I was a little in shock, but I was also like, I am unstoppable. Like, I had been stymied, like literally stymied my entire adult life, and suddenly I was unstoppable. And I felt for the first time in my entire adult life that I'd finally done something that actually said something about who I am. I wasn't the girl accused of murder anymore. I was the girl who was kind to my prosecutor. And that shift in the framing of how I saw myself and how I felt in the world, and how that gave me a sense of momentum instead of like a drag. Like, it's not that my story had changed. It's that my relationship to all of the elements of my story had changed. And I think that is something that really deeply impacted me. That's one of those hard lessons I learned the hard way. And it feels so counterintuitive. But like, if I could give any advice to anyone who is struggling and feeling stymied, it's like, it's a subtle shift in perspective of frame, where you imagine all the ways that you are unstoppable, that no one can actually stop you from doing what you need to do, what you have inside of you, what you have to give, regardless of what the circumstances are. Like, regardless of how stubborn and ignorant anybody around you is, like, you still have it in you, and you matter. What you have to offer matters. Like, that was a really important lesson for me to learn. And it took me almost 20 years now to learn it. But it is so valuable, and I have never felt more at peace with all of this than that moment.
I also think it's worth noting that, Amanda's mom was with us on this trip, and she had a very different reaction to the idea of Amanda going. She didn't want Amanda to go back to Italy.
Understandably.
The whole family didn't, and she didn't care that Giuliano Menini was in evolution, that he was struggling and trying to find his way slowly to get to this place of reconciliation. She very firmly, and she says this in the documentary, like, this man tortured my daughter. He stole her away for 4 years. Like, either because he's incompetent or because he's a horrible human being. But like, I don't care to ever meet him or forgive him. Like, that's not where Amanda's mother is at. And that's legitimate too. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important to have her perspective in the documentary, because you don't have to do what Amanda did. It's okay to be in the place where her mother is in relation to all this. But what I will say is that when we said we're going back to Italy, her mother didn't say, no, you're not. She said, not without me. And that gets me, because, what a mom, Just like, she didn't understand it, she didn't even agree with it, but she was there. And she was there to support us on that journey. So, thanks to Etta. I love Etta.
And the kids?
Yeah, they came with me too.
Wow.
Yeah, because they're a part of me, and they were so young when this was happening, so I wasn't going anywhere without them anyway. But yeah, they were there with me. And it's wild to have your prosecutor show up with a toy for your kids. It's
yeah.
It's just like, okay.
Wow. Well, before we're wrapping up, I want to make sure we touch on this stand-up comedy because
like we're crying. Crying.
let's talk about the laughs.
Yeah.
That's maybe not what many people were expecting, but you've been working on this.
It's a hard pivot, isn't it? Yeah. Hard pivot. No, I mean, I think that if you look at any of the great stand-up comics, like they're taking like deep, dark stuff that they've experienced or that they've observed out the world, and they're turning it on its head so that it becomes something that we can all connect with and laugh about. And I think that for me, humor has been a coping mechanism. I definitely laugh at myself and at the absurdity of the entire scenario. And I think that, I mean, just this morning I was thinking, someone was asking me yesterday at the Q&A, like, oh, how do you deal with people who are still recognizing you all the time? And I was like, well, I just got one of those mug shots. You know, it's just like, you just gotta laugh at it because it is absurd, and it's like the world is unfair, and we all hurt, and we all struggle, and this is my hurt and my struggle, and I can find, like, I feel a little bit lighter and a little more connected to people when we can all just have a laugh. It doesn't have to be a bummer. Like, it is tragic, and so many things are tragic, but there is an opportunity for human connection and levity. And, you know, I don't just, joke about prison. I also joke about being a mom and having, like, no libido left, like, it's a way for all of us to, like, connect and not feel like everything has to be so grave and serious all the time. My entire adult life has been struggling through these really grave and serious, difficult circumstances. And what a relief. What a relief.
I just love seeing you be joyful, and I think it's another thing she's reclaiming for herself is the ability to be silly. She was always a goofy, silly person. This is something that was really important to me at the beginning of Mouth of the Wolf, was to, like, make the entry point to this documentary, not the case, not the trial, not the scandal, but Amanda as the woman I fell in love with, who was goofy and who liked to dance in the kitchen and who was a great singer. Like, that full, round human being who also has this other deep part of her that stretches back to 2007 and that she's still dealing with. That's there too. But also, she's a kind of magician in a way. I think what comedy does is it transforms darkness into light. It transforms ugliness into beauty. And there's multiple ways of doing that. Another way of doing that is music, and that's another important part of Mouth of the Wolf, is there's original songs in there that Amanda composed and performs. And those acts of creativity are ways of taking this really dark subject matter, this brutal thing that happened to Meredith and to her, and finding a way to create beauty out of it.
One of my favorite things that my daughter has ever done, was she did an impression of me at the piano. I just heard her tinkering at the piano and sort of singing along, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's making her first song. So we, like, snuck up on her with he was taking a video, and as we got closer, we realized what she was doing. She was just going, ding, 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 I'm sad, I'm sad.
Yeah.
And I was like, sick burn, babe.
Yeah.
Great impression.
So you have an hour of material.
Yeah, I've been working on a one-woman show for the past year, and I've performed it twice so far, but I'm still workshopping it, so I want to bring that out probably later this year or early next year.
Got it. And so an hour-long show, but you also mentioned something coming up more quickly.
Oh,
right?
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm just opening for a friend of mine, Chris Porter, at the Emerald City Comedy Club on Thursday, so I'll be doing 15 minutes there.
Wow.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Well, I think that's everything for me. And if there was anything that you wanted to leave us with.
I think I'm not the only one who's feeling a little tender and a little untethered right now in this moment. Certainly the events over the weekend have brought up a lot of feelings for me. And I think one thing that I really want people to know in this moment of feeling divided and doubtful and scared is that we do all matter. We really are looking out for each other, like no one is not paying attention, and that there is a path forward and we're not trapped in our present circumstances. So like honor those feelings of fear and hurt, let them inform us, and also like let's not close our hearts to compassion and what that can bring, what wisdom that can bring to the table.
Even as we stand up for what we know is just. Like, it's not one or the other. It's not like rage is the only way to care about what's right.